In 1979, Heart to Heart was more than a detective show. It was glamour, danger, and romance on primetime television. The cast rose to fame almost overnight. Their lives changed forever. But 47 years later, time has been unforgiving. They aged, struggled, adapted, or quietly disappeared. What really happened after the cameras stopped rolling? Let's uncover where they are now. Robert Wagner as Jonathan Hart. Jonathan Hart, the elegant risk-taker in Heart to Heart, was played by Robert Wagner. At 49 years old, he gave the series its emotional gravity and seductive authority. The character was not merely wealthy. He was the catalyst that made danger feel luxurious and romance feel dangerous. Jonathan Hart functioned as the narrative engine of the show. Born February 10, 1930, in Detroit, Michigan, Wagner's childhood unfolded under pressure rather than comfort. At the age of 6, his family relocated abruptly to Los Angeles, a move that shattered stability and forced early adaptation to a competitive environment obsessed with image and hierarchy. The sudden exposure to Hollywood's rigid expectations created insecurity rather than opportunity. To survive, Wagner worked odd jobs, including caddying for Clark Gable, learning early that fame was close enough to observe but far from guaranteed. That sense of instability followed him into adulthood through turbulent marriages. His relationship with Natalie Wood was passionate, fractured, rekindled, and ultimately sealed by tragedy when she died under mysterious circumstances in 1981. The loss did not end with grief. It extended into decades of suspicion, reopened investigations, and public doubt that never fully released its grip. Later, his long marriage to Jill St. John offered stability, yet it existed under the constant shadow of unresolved history and public scrutiny. Age brought physical limitations alongside emotional ones. In his later years, Wagner faced cardiovascular issues typical of advanced age, forcing him to slow down and retreat from an active public life. Today, Robert Wagner is 96 years old, living largely out of the spotlight. He participates sparingly through interviews and memoir reflections, choosing silence over spectacle. With an estimated net worth of $20 million, accumulated through decades of acting, real estate investments, and publishing, his life was defined by elegance on screen, leaving behind a legacy that remains emotionally unfinished. Stefanie Powers as Jennifer Hart. Jennifer Hart, the incisive counterpart in Heart to Heart, was played by Stefanie Powers. At 37 years old, she shaped the soul of the series. Her character provided balance, intuition against risk, empathy against wealth, and logic against chaos. Jennifer Hart grounded the show emotionally, ensuring that mystery never overpowered humanity. Born November 2, 1942 in Hollywood, California, Powers' early life was marked by fracture and emotional absence. Her parents' divorce left her growing up without stability, forcing independence at a young age. Raised primarily by her mother, she learned to rely on discipline and self-control rather than reassurance. This early detachment quietly molded her resilience, long before audiences associated her with glamour or confidence. Her adult relationships carried the same emotional weight. Powers' marriages ended under strain, but it was the sudden death of William Holden in 1981 that reshaped her inner life permanently. Losing her partner while Heart to Heart was still thriving forced her to perform joy while privately absorbing shock and grief. Years later, the death of longtime companion Tom Carroll reopened emotional wounds she had never fully sealed, reinforcing a pattern of love repeatedly interrupted by loss. Physical illness later compounded that emotional history. In 2008, Powers was diagnosed with lung cancer, requiring surgery and chemotherapy while simultaneously caring for her dying mother. Recovery shifted her focus away from career ambition toward conservation and advocacy, transforming personal suffering into sustained purpose. Now, Stefanie Powers is 84 years old, still active through selective acting, public speaking, and wildlife preservation. She remains closely tied to the William Holden Wildlife Foundation, choosing legacy over visibility. With an estimated net worth of $9 million earned through acting, writing, and philanthropy, her life proves that survival can become a mission, even when shaped by repeated loss. Wyn Irwin as Lieutenant Gray. Lieutenant Gray, the blunt yet unexpectedly humane police detective in Heart to Heart, was played by Wyn Irwin. At 47 years old, he embodied institutional authority rubbing up against the Heart's unconventional methods. His presence grounded the series, turning professional irritation into dry humor and giving the mysteries a credible edge. Born December 11, 1932 in New York City, Irwin grew up in a working-class household where money was scarce and stability uncertain. The pressure to contribute came early, forcing him into jobs while still young and shaping the gravelly realism he later brought to television. The city taught him resilience long before acting became a viable path. Irwin married early and later divorced, so he had a son, Andy Irwin, and fatherhood became a quiet anchor amid an unpredictable career. Long shooting schedules and constant guest roles gradually strained family ties, creating emotional distance that never made headlines but left lasting marks. Professionally, Irwin was confined to supporting roles, fighting intense competition throughout the 1970s and 1980s. Even so, he carved out memorable work, appearing in Die Hard 2 and later Surviving Christmas, performances that leaned on authenticity rather than spectacle. Television remained his lifeline, offering visibility but rarely security. Sadly, Wyn Irwin died on February 15, 2018, at 85 years old, from age-related causes. His passing was quiet, without public ceremony. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was $500,000, built slowly through decades of steady television work. Lee Wilkof as Stanley Friesen. Stanley Friesen, the anxious, eccentric figure drawn into danger in Heart to Heart, was portrayed by Lee Wilkof. At just 28 years old, he injected nervous humor and unpredictability into the series. His role mattered because it showed how easily ordinary people could be swallowed by the Heart's glamorous world of crime and intrigue. Born June 25, 1951, in Canton, Ohio, Wilkof grew up in a small-town environment that felt restrictive rather than protective. Academic pressure and limited opportunity pushed him toward theater as an escape route. That choice carried him away from Ohio and into New York, where ambition replaced familiarity. Marriage brought stability, but not simplicity. In 1984, Wilkof married painter Constance Grappo, whom he met while performing in Little Shop of Horrors. Their relationship endured frequent strain caused by constant travel between New York stages and Hollywood sets, yet it survived through mutual commitment rather than compromise of ambition. His career unfolded unevenly. After Broadway success, film roles arrived sporadically, leading to periods of unemployment that forced Wilkof to reinvent himself as a director while continuing to act. He later reached wider audiences through projects like School of Rock, while his stage work earned him an Obie Award and a Tony nomination, recognition that validated years of uncertainty. In 2026, Lee Wilkof is 75 years old, living in Hudson Valley, New York, and still active in theater and independent film. He chooses projects deliberately, valuing substance over visibility. With an estimated net worth of $2 million, accumulated through decades of stage work and selective screen roles, his legacy reflects endurance, craft, and a career shaped more by integrity than fame. Mimi Maynard as Deanne, the enigmatic figure threading intrigue through Heart to Heart, was played by Mimi Maynard. At 30 years old, she brought a quiet intelligence to the series, shaping tension without ever dominating the frame. Her role mattered because it redirected suspicion and momentum, often becoming the unseen hinge on which an episode turned. Born January 5, 1949, in Queens, New York, Maynard grew up in a middle-class household defined by expectation and pressure rather than comfort. Education was emphasized early, and creative ambition had to fight for space. Drawn to performance from a young age, she learned discipline quickly, understanding that talent alone would not carry her forward. The city sharpened her instincts and taught her how to endure competition without complaint. Marriage brought complexity instead of clarity. Maynard married William Maynard in 1972, a relationship that ended in divorce in 1977 as careers pulled them in different directions. A second marriage to Henry Peter Zakrzewski followed, lasting from 1981 to 1984, before dissolving under similar strain. Her later marriage to actor James Keach from 1987 to 1993 was her most public, yet it too collapsed under the weight of balancing ambition. As on-screen roles narrowed, Maynard shifted behind the scenes, confronting a male-dominated industry where authority was rarely offered. She built credibility slowly through voice casting, direction, and production, expanding far beyond acting. Earlier screen appearances in Private Benjamin and Kindergarten Cop remained recognizable milestones, but her later influence was quieter and far more enduring. Today, Mimi Maynard is 77 years old, living and working in Los Angeles as a voice director and producer on animated and international projects. She remains active, shaping performances from behind the microphone rather than in front of the camera. With an estimated net worth of $3 million, earned through production, casting, and voice work, her story is one of adaptation. Success achieved not through visibility, but persistence. Paxton Whitehead as Patrick Burke. Patrick Burke, the polished British antagonist in Heart to Heart, was played by Paxton Whitehead. At 42 years old, he infused the series with cultured menace and ironic humor. The role mattered because it contrasted elegance with threat, turning civility into a weapon. Born October 17, 1937, in Kent, England, Whitehead grew up amid post-war austerity, where restraint and discipline were unavoidable. Opportunity felt narrow, and ambition demanded structure. Classical theater training offered both escape and rigor, but advancement required distance from home. His decision to move to the United States meant starting again, trading familiarity for uncertainty in pursuit of longevity. Marriage offered companionship, but not insulation from strain. Whitehead first married actress Patricia Gage, a union that ended in divorce in 1986 as careers and schedules clashed. He later married Katherine Robertson in 1987. A relationship that endured far longer and provided stability until her death in 2009. Even then, theater commitments and touring imposed separations that tested endurance more than affection. Health became decisive late in life. In his mid-80s, Whitehead suffered a fall that led to serious complications, abruptly interrupting a career that had remained active well into his later years. The decline was swift, contrasting sharply with a life defined by control and precision. His work continued to be remembered through stage acclaim and screen appearances, including Back to School and recurring television roles such as Friends. Finally, Paxton Whitehead died on June 16, 2023, at 85 years old, from complications following a fall in Arlington, Virginia. He left behind a respected body of work spanning Broadway, film, and television, including a Tony nomination for Camelot. With an estimated net worth of $2 million earned through decades of stage and screen performance, his legacy rests in refinement, proof that restraint can be as powerful as spectacle. Joe Pantoliano as Frank Tisdale. Frank Tisdale, the sharp-tongued, streetwise schemer in Heart to Heart, was played by Joe Pantoliano. At 28 years old, he brought raw edge and unpredictability into a series otherwise defined by elegance. His character mattered because he injected danger from the real world, reminding viewers that not every threat wore a tuxedo. Born September 12, 1951, in Hoboken, New Jersey, Pantoliano grew up in a poor Italian-American household shaped by instability. His parents divorced early, and the streets of Hoboken became both a classroom and a pressure cooker. Violence, survival instincts, and emotional isolation marked his childhood long before acting gave him an escape route. Marriage did not shield him from turmoil. His first marriage to Morgan Carem ended in divorce in 1985, strained by addiction and untreated psychological distress. Stability arrived later, in 1994, when he married Nancy Shepard, a relationship built on transparency rather than image. Even then, the scars of earlier years remained present, quietly influencing his personal life. Professionally, success came with a hidden cost. At the height of his career, Pantoliano was diagnosed with a serious mental health disorder that plunged him into depression. Instead of retreating, he chose exposure, continuing to work while confronting illness publicly. Performances in The Matrix as Cypher and The Sopranos as Ralph Cifaretto revealed unsettling psychological depth, earning him an Emmy Award in 2003 and redefining his legacy. Today, Joe Pantoliano is 75 years old, still acting selectively while living in Connecticut and openly advocating for mental health awareness through interviews and memoir work. His estimated net worth stands at $8 million, built from major film and television roles, wealth earned not just through talent, but through survival. John Considine as Elliot Knox. Elliot Knox, the polished manipulator operating behind the scenes in Heart to Heart, was portrayed by John Considine. At 44 years old, he brought restrained menace to the role, embodying power exercised quietly rather than violently. His character added a psychological layer to the series, proving intellect could be as dangerous as force. Born January 2, 1935 in Los Angeles, Considine was raised inside Hollywood's shadow. His grandfather, legendary producer John W. Considine Sr., cast a long presence over the family, creating expectations that felt more like obligations. From an early age, success was assumed, leaving little room for failure or exploration. His marriage remained largely private, but not without strain. Considine maintained a long-term relationship marked by tension tied to legacy and comparison. Carrying a famous surname into adulthood created emotional distance at home, as professional pressure followed him beyond studio walls. Career struggles emerged when he shifted focus from acting to writing. Several screenplay projects failed to gain traction, forcing him to confront disappointment quietly rather than publicly. Even so, he left meaningful marks, contributing to films like A Wedding and appearing in iconic television such as The Twilight Zone. Recognition came through respect, not awards. In 2026, John Considine is 91 years old, retired in California, and occasionally sharing industry reflections at panels and retrospectives. He lives outside the spotlight he was born into, with an estimated net worth of $1.5 million accumulated through decades of acting and writing, a quiet conclusion to a life shaped by expectation more than ambition. Diana Muldaur as Janet, the poised and quietly unsettling figure in Heart to Heart, was played by Diana Muldaur. At 41 years old, she infused the series with controlled tension rather than overt threat. The role mattered because Janet unsettled through intelligence, restraint, and emotional distance, proving that danger in the show could emerge without raised voices or visible aggression. Her presence shifted scenes by implication alone. Born August 19, 1938, in Brooklyn, New York, Muldaur was raised between the intensity of the city and the isolation of Martha's Vineyard. Childhood was shaped by academic pressure and high expectations, leaving little room for uncertainty. Acting began early as both discipline and escape, pushing her to develop focus and resilience long before recognition arrived. Formal training under Stella Adler hardened that resolve, teaching her to endure scrutiny as part of the craft. Marriage brought profound loss. Muldaur married actor James Vickery, her co-star on The Secret Storm, and his death from cancer in 1979 ended the marriage abruptly and painfully. Years later, she married writer-producer Robert Dozier, whose death from prostate cancer in 2012 reopened grief she had learned to live beside, not beyond. These losses reshaped her private life quietly, without retreat or public collapse. Her career, meanwhile, narrowed even as it peaked. Frequently cast as formidable, intelligent women, Muldaur found opportunity shrinking with age rather than expanding. Still, her impact remained undeniable through landmark roles as Dr. Catherine Pulaski in Star Trek, The Next Generation, and the razor-sharp Rosalind Shays in L.A. Law. That performance earned her 2 Emmy nominations and cemented her reputation for portraying power that unsettled audiences. Now, Diana Muldaur is 88 years old, retired in Studio City, California, and devoted to animal welfare causes. She has chosen distance from the industry that once relied on her intensity. With an estimated net worth of $3 million, built through decades of television work, her story closes in quiet dignity, marked by strength, loss, and a legacy that never needed spectacle to endure. Mimi Rogers as Robin Wall. Robin Wall, the seductive artist with concealed motives in Heart to Heart, was played by Mimi Rogers. At 23 years old, she injected the series with youthful danger and psychological ambiguity. The role mattered because Robin blurred desire and deception, drawing characters closer while quietly steering them off balance. Her presence proved that charm could be a weapon long before violence entered the room. Born January 27, 1956, in Coral Gables, Florida, Rogers grew up inside a restless childhood shaped by constant relocation and rigid belief. Her father's deep involvement with Scientology meant frequent moves across states and countries, leaving little sense of permanence. Religious pressure and early intellectual expectations forced maturity before freedom, and by 14, she had already completed high school. Independence came early, but it arrived alongside isolation. Marriage became public terrain rather than private refuge. Rogers first married Jim Rogers, divorcing in 1980 as both were still searching for direction. Her second marriage to Tom Cruise in 1987 placed her under an unforgiving spotlight, turning personal conflict into international spectacle before their divorce in 1990. Years later, she found steadier ground with producer Chris Chiaffa, whom she married in 2003 after more than a decade together, building a family that finally existed outside headlines. Her career carried both acclaim and strain. Breakthrough performances arrived with emotional risk, most notably in The Rapture, a role that demanded spiritual extremity and earned her an Independent Spirit Award nomination. Public scrutiny after her high-profile divorce complicated casting, yet she persisted, later anchoring prestige television with complex authority figures, including her long-running role on Bosch. In 2026, Mimi Rogers is 70 years old, living in Rancho Santa Fe while balancing selective acting with professional poker competition. She plays tournaments seriously, sits on industry boards, and chooses projects with intent rather than urgency. With an estimated net worth of $10 million, built from film, television, and poker earnings, her life reflects reinvention after exposure, a career survived not by retreat, but by redefining the game entirely. George Del Hoyo as Peter Schmidt. George Del Hoyo was born in 1953 in Canelones, Uruguay. At 26 years old, he played Peter Schmidt, a charming, sophisticated character with complex psychological layers in Heart to Heart. This role not only added a romantic dimension to the story, but also created a sense of vague danger, making the Heart duo's investigation even more unpredictable. Behind the scenes lies a turbulent childhood. George Del Hoyo emigrated from Uruguay to the United States as a child, growing up feeling lost between language and culture. Adapting to a new environment forced him to mature early, always feeling the need to speak correctly and live skillfully, a silent pressure that followed him throughout his early years. Marriage provided him with rare stability. Since 1983, George Del Hoyo has been married to Deborah May, and they have 2 children. Despite their long-term commitment, family life was still stressful due to his demanding schedule, constantly moving between stage, film sets, and recording studios, leaving little time for his family. Del Hoyo's career took a different turn when he shifted heavily into voice acting. Competing with native speakers forced him to start from scratch, persistently building his own unique style. Previously, he gained attention for his role as Orpheus in Days of Our Lives and appeared in several major series. Later, his voice became familiar to video game audiences through the Descent series, where he voiced the main character, opening a path that was enduring but less glamorous. Today, George Del Hoyo, at 73 years old, was still actively working as a voice artist in Los Angeles. He chose to work behind the microphone rather than in front of the camera, maintaining a private and stable life. His estimated net worth is around $2 million, derived from decades of dedicated work in television, gaming, and voice acting, a quiet but steady career. Jill St. John as Sylvia Maxwell. Sylvia Maxwell, the elusive woman at the center of the Heart to Heart pilot, was portrayed by Jill St. John. At 39 years old, she stepped into the role with a calm elegance that immediately unsettled the story's balance. Sylvia was not written to dominate the plot, yet her presence quietly shaped the intrigue, leaving behind suspicion, allure, and unanswered questions. It was a performance designed to linger rather than resolve, and that restraint made it unforgettable. Born August 19, 1940. In Los Angeles, Jill St. John grew up inside Hollywood's machinery long before she could choose otherwise. As a child actress, she carried adult expectations into classrooms and sound stages, forced to perform, study, and mature simultaneously. Her mother managed every detail with intensity, even changing her surname to make her more marketable, and the pressure to succeed replaced the freedom most children take for granted. By her teens, discipline had already eclipsed innocence. Her private life mirrored that instability. Jill St. John married Neil Dubin as a teenager, a union that ended quickly and painfully. Her second marriage to Lance Reventlow, heir to the Woolworth fortune, collapsed under emotional strain despite lingering affection. A third marriage to singer Jack Jones also ended in divorce, worn down by distance and clashing ambitions. Only later did she find lasting stability with Robert Wagner, whom she married in 1990 after decades of knowing one another, building a partnership shaped as much by shared history as by resilience. Professionally, success carried its own cost. After global fame as Tiffany Case in Diamonds Are Forever, Jill St. John became permanently branded as a Bond girl, desired, admired, but narrowly defined. Offers narrowed, and she chose to step back rather than repeat herself endlessly. Earlier acclaim in films like The Lost World and a Golden Globe-nominated performance in Come Blow Your Horn proved her range, but Hollywood's memory proved shorter than its appetite for labels. By 2026, Jill St. John is 86 years old, living quietly in Aspen with Robert Wagner, far from premieres and speculation. She has long retired from acting, devoting herself to cooking, philanthropy, and a carefully guarded private life. Her estimated net worth of $10 million reflects not only decades of screen work, but also successful cookbooks and television appearances beyond acting. She chose when to leave, how to live, and what to protect, an ending defined not by fading fame, but by control reclaimed. So after 47 years, which Heart to Heart cast members' journey surprised you the most, the quiet disappearances, the painful losses, or the unexpected second lives far from Hollywood, If you enjoyed revisiting these untold stories, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because every forgotten face has a story worth remembering.